5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Common Man's Take on Sports with Kevin and Quentin.
Alright, welcome to another episode of the Common Man's Take on Sports. Today's show, we're going to talk about some of the results for this weekend of college football. Kind of give our takes of what we thought of how some of these teams performed. So, let's go ahead and get started. I will say that last time I said without further ado, let's get into this. And my wife, your mom, told me never say that again. So, I'm not going to. She's usually right. Stuff like that. So, now, let's go ahead and get started with our show. She does give me very good feedback about our show, though. Your mom listens to our show every time we put out an episode. Now she gives me feedback on stuff that we can improve on.
Go.
All right, let's talk about some college football. Let's jump right into. There's only one game left: Florida State and Boston College. Honestly, I want to go over some of the big games and kind of talk about my reaction. Now, it is just one game, but I will say, even though it was just one game, to be honest, some of the team's performances were a little underwhelming. For me, I expected a little more. I didn't think that some of these teams would perform the way that they did. So let's start with the big one of the first games of the day, Georgia, Clemson. So as we get into that one, I will say that Clemson held their own for a long time. The whole first half, at the half it was 6-0, Georgia. Georgia had kicked 2 field goals at that point. Clemson scored their first points in the third, and then their defense kind of started wearing down, and you could tell it did. Now let's talk about this for a little bit. I thought Clemson would perform a little better on offense. Their defense was stout, as it always is. However, their defense wore down, and Georgia started scoring on them. You could tell they were getting tired out there. So my take from this game is, their offense needs a lot of work. I thought Cade Klubnik would take a big step forward this year, and although I don't think he did bad, I don't think they put him in the best position to succeed either. He was 18 of 29 for 142 yards and 1 interception. There were plays they called that were good and they worked, and then they went away from them. And I will say that I feel like they've had some inconsistency in their offensive coordinator, in their offensive coordinator since Tony Elliott left. Seems like under Tony Elliott, they ran a spread, which worked for Deshaun Watson, and it also worked for Trevor Lawrence and the personnel they had. Now they run a air raid under the new offensive coordinator, which I don't know if it necessarily fits Cade Klubnik's abilities, right? But we'll see. It's just one game. Their offense was underwhelming. They only had 47 yards rushing, which is rare for Clemson. They're usually a heavy rush team. They only had 142 yards passing. However, they were facing a Georgia team that is very good. I don't want to take anything away from Georgia. Carson Beck in his second year also as a starter. He looked tremendous against a very, very tough Clemson defense. He was 23 of 33 that's good for 69% completion percentage, for 278 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then Georgia ran for another 169 yards. With their leading rusher being Frazier with 11 attempts for 83 yards and a touchdown, and they had one other kid run for 15 yards and a touchdown. So, Georgia looked the part. They looked like the number one team in the country. They've been very good at reloading and not rebuilding under Kirby Smart, and once again, they look like a title contender, playing a very tough team like Clemson, and beating them 34-3. I still feel like Clemson's offensive performance is very, very underwhelming for my liking. They need to figure out how to build that offense around what they have. I thought last year Phil Maffa, even though he split carries, he was still the leading rusher, and I thought he did outstanding last year. I don't know. I thought he would do a lot better in this game too, when he got his opportunities, he did, but Georgia kind of clamped down, and I was very underwhelmed by that offense. You usually don't see a Dabo Swinney-led team they were just stale on offense, for lack of a better term, right? And you usually don't see a Dabo Swinney-led team be like that. I know this is like his third offensive coordinator since Tony Elliott left, second or third. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I was very underwhelmed by that game. What did you think?
I mean, I'm not really surprised Clemson didn't play very well, because especially against Georgia defense. Georgia's defense has been really good for the past few years. Now, I think
4 or 5.
True.
Yeah, since Kirby Smart's been there. Go ahead.
I think Cade Klubnik should have played a little bit better in this game. I also think Phil Maffa should have played a little bit better in this game. But honestly, I'm not really surprised that Clemson got blown out by Georgia.
I didn't think they'd get blown out. I thought this game would be closer. I thought that Georgia would probably win it, but I didn't think it would be a 34-3. Which I will say once again, let's keep in mind that at the end of the half, it was 6-0 Georgia. So the game was closer than the final score indicated. Second half, Georgia made some adjustments. Obviously, their adjustments were better than Clemson's, because Clemson scored 3 points the whole game, which came in the third quarter, and Georgia scored 14 in the third and another 14 in the fourth. So
I think that Clemson's defense just got tired because.
I agree. They spent a lot of time on the field that game.
Yeah, I think it's just because of the offense wasn't. The offense didn't spend much time on the field. That didn't give Clemson's defense enough time to get a breather. So I honestly think that their offense had 27 minutes, 18 seconds of possession time.
Mm-hmm.
So
It was Georgia's.
32 minutes and 42 seconds.
See, it was kind of close, possession. My thing is that Clemson came away with too many empty possessions. That's why I said they were underwhelming on offense. They did well. They called some plays that worked, and they were moving the ball. Like, they had some big plays. The problem was they couldn't finish. They couldn't keep it going. That's why I think the problem maybe is, and again, I'm just speculating here because it's one game, but for me, the play calling was a little rough for them, because they call a couple of good plays, they move the ball, and then they would call a play that would get them behind the sticks, and then they never really recovered. And so I think their offensive coordinator needs to work. That's what I'm saying. I think he needs to work on his play calling, and they need to work on tailoring the offense better to, say, Maffa and Klubnik and their receivers, right? Because they had some receivers that were open. When they were open, he was hitting them. Let me go back here and look. Specifically, Williams had 6 receptions for 76 yards. Barringstow, who I believe was the tight end, had 3 for 26. They had some pretty good, yes, he is the tight end. I mean, they had guys open. Sometimes he was missing them. Sometimes they were just, the plays just weren't, working out. I really think that they should have done better with their halftime adjustments, to be honest. But again, they called some plays that worked, and then all of a sudden they started calling plays that you're kind of scratching your head like, what? So those are my thoughts on that one. Obviously there's a whole lot of season left. Clemson has plenty of time to improve. I still think they're going to be one of the top teams in the ACC. I'm not out on them yet, but I think they do have some work to do. So let's move on to the other early game, which was Penn State and West Virginia. That game was Penn State 34-12, and so I will be 100% honest with you. I will reference, I called upset in our podcast before this weekend for that game. I will say that I was impressed with Drew Allar. I think that he, at least for this game, I don't know how good West Virginia is. I thought they'd be better in that game, but I will say that he 11 for 17 for 64% completion percentage, 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. He impressed me. I think he impressed me more than he did last year. That was good. They have a new offensive coordinator down there in Penn State. So so far against West Virginia first game, I was a little impressed with Penn State. I'll be honest with you. They also had 235 yards passing overall and 227 yards rushing. That's pretty balanced, and that's pretty good. That's what you want to see, from any team. Nick Singleton, 13 carries, 114 yards and a touchdown. Drew Allar, 6 carries for 44 yards. He ran when he needed to keep the offense going. So again, that Penn State offense looked pretty good. We'll see how they do as the season goes along, but I'll say that the jump forward that they've been talking about Drew Allar was going to make, so far, first game out against West Virginia, I was impressed. I thought he did very well. What did you think?
Yeah, I expected the game to be a little bit way close.
I did too. I actually thought there was a chance for an upset there.
Yeah, but I am really impressed with Drew Allar. I'm impressed what he did in that game. 11 for 17. He had 3 pass touchdowns, 216 yards. That's pretty good. And then Nicholas Singleton had a pretty good game too. But I thought the game would be a little closer, but I think Penn State did really good. I thought West Virginia's offense would do better. I really did. But Penn State did really good on offense, and their defense was really good too. I was going to say that because you only have West Virginia did 12 points. So I think Penn State played pretty good in this game. Still a lot of season left though, so.
Let's move on to the Ohio State-Akron game. Ohio State started a little slow. They had some struggles there in the first half before they finally blew it open. I think they had some, we watched a little bit of this game. Their offensive line had some issues there to begin with. They had ended up with their new quarterback, Will Howard, went 17 of 28 for 60% completion percentage, 228 yards and 3 touchdowns. Travion Henderson ran 8 attempts for 65 yards. Judkins was 13 for 55 yards and a touchdown. And they had another running back who had 6 for 30 yards and a touchdown. And then Howard himself ran 14 attempts for 18 yards. So Jeremiah Smith, 6 receptions for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. First game out, he played extremely well. He looked really good. To be honest with you, he looked the best receiver they had. Cornell Tate had 4 for 58 yards and 1 touchdown. And Emeka Ibuka, who's been there for like 10 years now, 4 receptions for 51 yards. He's probably the one receiver that was pretty highly touted coming out of high school. One of their top recruits has never really truly panned out the way that Ohio State receivers have, recently.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Mecca Buka would get more.
I thought he would be the number one receiver this year with Marvin Harrison Jr. gone. That's what I thought. And first game out against Akron, he did not step up, but Jeremiah Smith did. Jeremiah Smith looked really good. He ran some pretty nice crisp routes. He also has some speed. So once again, I thought Ibuka would be, I'm with you, I thought he would be the number one receiver this year, but it does not look like that's going to be the case. Looks like Jeremiah Smith will be the number one receiver to take over.
Yeah, I'm surprised Jeremiah Smith. Well, you know what? He did pretty good in this game, honestly, for a freshman. I thought Emeka Ibuka would get more targets and more receptions, and he didn't even get a receiving touchdown. I thought so. This game was kind of. I guess Jeremiah Smith's gonna be the number one wide receiver, but I really thought he'd be the number one wide receiver coming back for last season.
Yeah. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Ohio State defense looked a lot better this year than they have the last couple of years. They did get a couple of takeaways, and I believe they had one for a defensive touchdown. So that's rare for them. So that's a plus for them. Let me see. Interception. They did have one interception. Denzel Burke. So their defense, 2 interceptions. Powers was the other one, and he's the one that got the pick 6 for a touchdown. So they had 2 interceptions, 1 defensive touchdown. That's pretty good for them, especially considering how their defense was, the last couple of years. So Ohio State's looking pretty good there in the early going. They did have some struggles against Akron, but in all honesty, first game out, there's a bunch of players here that this is their first time playing together. So I'm sure there was some learning time there of kind of what everybody does and how to play together with each other. So not bad, 52-6. That's what they should win by. So I think if they get the offensive line struggles shored up, they're going to be forced to contend with in the Big Ten. They're probably the leader right now in the Big Ten for the best team right now. But we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Oregon, they struggled a little bit with Idaho. They won 24-14. Of course, they got a new quarterback. Bo Nix went to the NFL, which looks like he did pretty good in preseason, in training camp, because he got the starting nod as a rookie, and that's pretty impressive. Not very many rookies get that starting nod right out the gate. But anyway, back to the college game. Oregon still did Oregon things. They just were a little underwhelming to me against an Idaho team. The fact that they were 24-14, I don't think it's anything to go crazy about, because Dylan Gabriel was 41 of 49 for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns, which was normal for them. They had 110 rushing yards. Their leading rusher was James, 15 attempts for 95 yards and a touchdown. So I don't know. It was weird to not see them just straight dominate. Again, they have some new people, so maybe it's just players figured out, how to play together. Their defense did give up a passing touchdown, 168 yards passing, but the quarterback was only 44%, 1125, so that's still pretty dang good for a defense. They only gave up 49 yards rushing, so pretty stout Oregon defense. Good offense, they just had trouble finishing. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward, but I think Oregon will be just fine. Nebraska won against UTEP 40-7. I'm not going to go much into that one. If Nebraska plays Colorado next week, I'll probably go more in depth with that game, because That'll be an interesting game between Nebraska and Colorado. If I may even watch that game, depending on what time it's on. Texas looked good against Colorado State, 52-0. Alabama, 63-0, looked good against Western Kentucky. They did what they're supposed to do. Ole Miss beat Furman, 76-0. Let's get down to Michigan and Fresno State. I was extremely underwhelmed with Michigan's offense. Defense was great. The defense showed up to play. The only thing I would say to Mr. Wayne Martindale is don't run the zero blitz. Had he not ran a zero blitz on the one scoring play that Fresno State scored the touchdown, Fresno State doesn't get a touchdown. He ran zero blitz with no safety help, and obviously the receiver got open, and it was night-night. Michigan did win 30-10. However, that game was a lot closer than that score indicates. Michigan was only up 10-3 at the half. They only scored 3 points in the third quarter, and at one point it was 17-10 in the fourth quarter. And that is not what you look for against a team like Fresno State and a defending national champion like Michigan. And their offense was anemic. The highlight of the game was Will Smith's pick six, 86-yard pick six. Return for a touchdown. Outside of that, Davis Warren won the job in the offseason as a quarterback. I was a little underwhelmed by him. He was 60% passing, which isn't bad, 15-25, 118 yards and a touchdown, and then an interception. The interception was a bad interception. And they had Orgy, who came in threw 1 for 2 for 3 yards and a touchdown. Again, Kilo Mullins, 15 attempts for 92 yards. Orgy had another 5 for 32. Edwards had 11 for 27. Colson Loveland was the best receiver on the field, 8 receptions for 87 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Morris didn't step up. Samaj Morgan didn't step up. They're going to have to find ways to make that offense work. I don't know what they need to do, but their date with Texas next week is going to be very, very bad if they don't fix their offensive problems. Part of the reason that they had a horrible offense showing was their offensive line. You could tell that it was their first game all working together, that it was a brand new offensive line because they were missing blocks. Some of the running backs were missing blocks. They looked unprepared on offense. Honestly, they looked unprepared. So I was very, very underwhelmed with their offensive performance. Again, defense stellar as usual. That's a Michigan staple, is defense. What did you think?
I really thought that Alex Orji should have been the starting quarterback for Michigan. But Davis Warren did have a pretty good game. Now that interception, I think, was I don't think he should have targeted that wide receiver because triple coverage on that pass.
So before you go any further, hold on just a second. Although the reason that became triple coverage, so Fred Moore was behind the defense. The problem was Davis Warren didn't have the arm to get it there. He launched it as hard as he could, and he didn't have the arm to get it there, so he short-armed it. And it was in the pass ended up being short, and that's how the DBs were able to get there and get the pick. Had he been able to lead Fred Moore on that pass, that would have been a touchdown for Michigan. So that's something to watch going forward. Clearly, Davis Warren does not have the arm, at least in this game. It didn't look like it to hit the deep pass, right? He's going to be more of a intermediate, to medium pass kind of guy. So go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead.
Okay. I expected a big game from Donovan Edwards. Khalil Mullins had a pretty good game. I expected Donovan Edwards to get at least 90 yards rushing, but he ended up with 27. So, the Michigan defense was pretty good. I did see there's some problems with that offensive line though. And then I think Samaj Morgan should have stepped up, and also Tyler Morris. I think it's also especially Tyler Morris, because Tyler Morris, I think he's a senior now.
No, I think he's a junior,
No,
but
yeah,
he's an upperclassman, that's for sure.
Yeah, he should have stepped up. I think he should have stepped up in that game. But Colston Loveland had a good game. And that defense pretty good. Josiah Stewart. Now I want to talk about Josiah Stewart. He had a really good game. 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 5 tackles. Rashawn Benny also had a good game. 5 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss. So I just wanted to point those two out because they had some pretty good games.
Can't argue with that.
I hope they do the same thing against Texas. I just want to say I hope they do the same thing against Texas. But Michigan is definitely have to work on their rushing game and also the passing game, because if they don't get, because if they're not better with that passing game or the rushing game,
Well, it's going to be a long year for them.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a long year, long day against Texas.
It's going to be a long year if they don't fix the offensive line and that passing.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's skip down to a game that another game I was really interested in watching, and I loved every minute of it. The Miami-Florida game, the Hurricanes, man, if they play the rest of the year like they did against Florida, man, the U is back. They looked good. I know it's a little early to say that, and Florida's kind of down, and Mr. Napier, I believe, is probably coaching for his job right now. Because at Florida, you don't get to lose 41-17 to the Miami Hurricanes. Oh wow! But here's another transfer quarterback that, man, that kid looked good. He probably just got himself into the Heisman conversation. He was 26 of 35, 74% passing completion percentage, 385 yards and 3 touchdowns with 1 interception. He was phenomenal in that game while I was watching it.
You know, I want to point something out that was a key. So I'm looking at stats here. Florida only had 122 yards passing. So I want to say I think it was also Miami's defense. Miami's defense doing pretty good, honestly. Cam Ward, 385 yards passing, 3 passing touchdowns, and only an interception.
Cam Ward looked like the truth in that game.
Oh yeah, man, he was great. And like
that looked like the old school Miami teams. The way they were running that offense, and just out-athleting Florida and just outplaying them all together, man. It was a good game to watch. I enjoyed it.
If Miami keeps playing like this, I'm going to be excited to see them play Florida State.
Oh yeah. Well, they'll just dominate Florida State. The game that I'm looking forward to, let's see if it's even on their schedules, if they play Clemson. That's the game. Do they play Clemson?
Nope.
Ooh, so the only way they play Clemson would be the ACC championship game. I would love to see that.
Oh yeah, man,
I would love to see that. But yeah, Miami is going to be tough, man. They looked good. Cam Ward looked good. Man, I enjoyed watching that game.
Yeah, man. You know, Florida State's the only ranked team they play.
Is it now?
Season.
Well, Florida State will be ranked long, I guarantee that.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's the last game tonight is Boston College and Florida State, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to be a very good game. I don't think either one of them are stellar. We'll see. This will probably be a low-scoring game. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm
we'll
excited.
see how Florida State rebounds from that loss to Georgia Tech.
Oh yeah, I want to see how Florida State plays after that loss to Georgia Tech. I want to see how they play against Boston College too. I also want to see how Boston College plays because they've got a new head coach, Bill O'Brien. I'm excited to see how their offense does and how their defense does. But I mean, I have a feeling Florida State might win this, but I also have a feeling that Boston College could get the upset. I think Boston College could get the upset here against Florida State.
Honestly, at this point, after the loss to Georgia Tech, I don't feel like it's much of an upset if they win. That's just my opinion. All right. Last game I wanted to talk about was a big matchup was LSU USC. Again, this was a phenomenal game to watch. I enjoyed every second of it. At the half, it was 10-10. It was very defense dominated, for sure, throughout the game. LSU was up 17-13, and then USC got a touchdown in the fourth, and it was 20-17. LSU kicks a last-minute field goal with a minute, and I think it was 43 or 50 seconds on the clock. And USC, it was probably one of the most perfect 2-minute drills I've ever seen. They moved it down the field, perfect timing, all the way to the end. They used their timeouts wisely. They burned the clock. They had a player who got out of bounds to stop the clock. They were running a hurry-up offense. They literally moved it down the field. I think it was like 88, 89 yards, and scored a touchdown to win the game with 8 seconds left. If you wanted to run a 2-minute offense, that's how you do it. Is the way that USC did it at the end of that game. It was not the way outcome I wanted out of the game. My wife is from New Orleans, so she's a big LSU fan. I was rooting for LSU with her. However, if I'm just being 100% honest, it was a great game. Very, very great. Good. It was great to watch. It came down to the end. It was very exciting. You didn't know who was going to win until, USC. Everybody thought USC was going to kick a field goal to win, and they got to go ahead touchdown off a run. Very, very good game. I enjoyed it. Both teams looked very stellar. I think both teams are going to be good going forward. USC is going to be a very tough out in the Big Ten, I believe. After watching that game, I believe USC's defense looked better this year than it has the last couple of years. They had a lot of good stops on LSU, and I think very, very good play on both sides. LSU had 304 yards passing. Gary Nussmeier, he was 29-38 for 76.3% completion percentage for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Man, you couldn't ask no more out of that kid. He played outstanding. Emery had 10 carries for 61 yards. Williams had 9 for 33. Jackson 6 for 18. Receptions, Lacey looked really good as their next standout wide receiver. 7 receptions for 94 yards and a touchdown. Anderson had 5 for 64 and a touchdown. Taylor 77 for 62 yards. I mean, they were LSU's offense and defense was clicking on all cylinders. And in USC, same thing. Miller Moss 27-36 for 75% completion percentage, 378 yards with 1 touchdown. They had Marks, who had 16 attempts for 68 yards and 2 touchdowns. Joyner for 4 for 12. Hudson, 5 receptions for 83 yards. McCree, 5 for 56. Branch, 4 for 56. Lane, 3 for 50. As you can see, Moss spread the ball around. Both quarterbacks had outstanding games. Both quarterbacks showed a lot of poise when their teams needed it. They did what they had to do. It all came down to the last play and who had the ball last. USC had the ball last, and they won the game. And that was enjoyed watching both. Again, USC is going to be a problem in the Big Ten, I think. I was very impressed with their defense in that game. And their offense looks like it's going to be just fine under Lincoln Riley. I think LSU is going to be tough in the SEC. I think they played USC very tough. I don't think they have anything to hold their heads about either. It's a very, very good. Probably the best game I saw all weekend was last night, LSU USC.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good game. I kind of wish LSU would have won that game, but honestly, it's a pretty good game by both teams. I think it was a really good defensive game. Both defenses were really good in that game.
I know that the stats don't sound like it, but both defenses got several stops, made the other side go 3 and out several times. So, just the score at the half tells you that it was a very good defensive game, 10-10, right? So, yeah, very good defensive game. I enjoyed that game very much. It was a very exciting game. Again, you didn't know who was going to win until the very end. And it basically came down to who had the ball last.
Yep.
So, that's kind of all I had for a highlight. Some of the big games. There's some other teams that played, but they played games that were kind of like, don't know what they're made of yet. Iowa, for the first time, they had a good offensive showing, but they also played Illinois State. They won 40-0, so you can't really judge them on that. Although in previous years they probably don't do that, but we'll see what happens when they play somebody meaningful and see if their offense looks that good. Maryland won 50-7 against Connecticut. Some other games out there: Ole Miss 76-0. Purdue 49-0 against Indiana State. UNLV beat Houston 27-7. Indiana won 31-7 against FIU, and Iowa State beat North Dakota State 21-3. So, some other games out there, but I just wanted to highlight the games that we thought would be important and good games. Kind of go over the results and kind of what our first takes were on the teams who we picked to be championship contenders this year. You got anything that you want to add to that?
No, nothing else.
All right. That'll wrap us up for today for the results of the first week of college football. We look forward to covering some Major League Baseball in our next episode. We thank everybody for watching, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we'll see you next time on the Common Man's Take for Sports.